My name's Jim Stein. I'm the LA Fish Guy. Welcome back to the new, old, shorter, multi-part version. Are you ready?
So it's Friday night about 6:30. I was just about ready to order pizza to be delivered and the phone rang. Well, it was one of my long-term service customers. I've known Marilyn for 20 years. I probably started servicing her original tank, ironically a hexagon, back in about 1994. Anyhow, she indicated that they found water on the floor around the base of the tank. Over the phone, I tried to determine where exactly the source of that water was coming from, and all I really got out of her was there's a bunch of salt crust behind the stand. So we're en route right now for two reasons. One, I don't get that many emergency calls, so this will kind of be fun. And two, she's a long-term customer, so we do want to make it a point to take care of her. So let's see what we find.
Marilyn had an appointment, so she's made arrangements for me to let myself in. Upon first glance, she's placed towels around the base of the stand. Often these floors, when they get water between the planks, their edges turn up. So we want to resolve and clean this up quickly.
Well, I do see some salt crust back there. And some collected salt crust down there. My expectation is that's just a collection of moisture, unfortunately, but let's look a little bit further. There is some moisture sitting on top of the wet-dry trickle filter. Well, I am seeing something, and that is moisture up on that bulkhead. See how it looks shiny there? I have a feeling water's dripping down there. And pooling there. Why would it be? Oh, and then it's wicking over the edge because of the salt crust. So I figured out what it is. And what it is potentially significant. The bulkhead out of the bottom of the overflow is loose. Not only am I able to turn the nut a little bit with my hand, but at the same time as I turn, I can kind of turn the bulkhead, the threaded portion as well. So that may be an interesting fix. So first things first, we're going to use a shop vac and at least try to go through and clean up some of that salt crust so we can more clearly identify and at least conveniently work in an area that's a little awkward to reach.
Hardwood or planked floors are very attractive, but tend to not hold up to water spills. I've often suggested to customers who are considering these types of floors to have a second or third coat of sealant applied, as it's the sides of the planks that are the most vulnerable and will warp or turn up at their edges once soaked with water.
So you can see it's a little bit cleaner in there. At least I got the top of the wet-dry trickle filter where the water was pooling cleaned up. The problem though is that bulkhead, and I see it's starting to drip again. So I've got to somehow figure out how to tighten that. I'm not sure if I can reach in from the back side or if I have to do it from the front side or if I have to pull the wet-dry trickle filter out of there to reach in there and properly do it. I'm going to try to clean up a little bit more salt crust that may have fallen down here.
Okay, I think I got all the salt crust vacuumed up. Now we need to address that bulkhead or the nut to tighten it, and I don't know how I'm going to reach in there and do it. Are you still tumbling biopellets? Tired of constantly replacing your GFO? Or trying to grow algae in your refugium? And you still have algae problems? Get real! Real filtration, that is. Algae scrubbers from Santa Monica Filtration will turn this into this by growing this weekly. 2 styles of scrubbers, the Hog and the Surf. Both are extremely easily installed and noticeably effective. You want results? Algae scrubbers are the answer. Visit santa-monica.cc. Next time you're near Long Beach, California, take the time to stop in at Age of Aquariums, 2642 Cherry Avenue, just off the 405 freeway near Signal Hill. Age of Aquariums carries a full line of dry goods, supplements, and exotic equipment. Age of Aquariums also carries a wide assortment of living corals, coral frags, as well as fresh and saltwater fish, ranging from the usual, the unusual, and the bizarre. Age of Aquariums is located at 2642 Cherry Avenue, Long Beach, California, near Signal Hill. Open 7 days a week. Call 562-438-6252 or visit ageofaquariums.biz.
This tank has an internal overflow. It's about a 90-gallon hexagon tank with a 3-sided internal overflow mounted in the back. And of course there's a drain out of the bottom of it, and the return line comes up and then pokes out through the face of the overflow. So again, there's a internal overflow inside the tank, and it's the bulkhead at the bottom of that overflow that is leaking. So I'm pretty sure that's what it is. That nut that you tighten on the threaded portion of the bulkhead, basically it compresses the gasket between the flange of the bulkhead, which is on the inside of the internal overflow, or in many cases would be on the inside of the tank. And it compresses that gasket to make a seal. Well, in this case, the nut has come a little bit loose, and in addition, I'm able to kind of turn the bulkhead. So the problem is reaching in there. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do it. For the moment, I'm just going to try to see if I can tighten the bulkhead by hand. I do feel a couple of notches in that bulkhead, which is probably what I'd used once before to tap that collar into place. So one of the mistakes that people make quite often when they drill or cut a hole through the top of the stand to accommodate the drain bulkheads or return lines is they don't cut the holes big enough. I say big enough so that you could actually get maybe a channel lock or a monkey wrench or something in there. And to a certain degree, I'm kind of guilty of that. Here's a little tip. Why devote a bunch of time to cutting out, say, a couple of holes, a drain line and a return line, inches apart, when you could just use a saber saw and cut a much bigger square opening so that if you really had to get in there, there would be plenty of room, and it would be just as much work to cut one bigger opening than it would 2 smaller openings. Now, the only way I can see fixing this, aside from pulling the wet-dry trickle filter out, which means I'd have to drain the tank and push it away from the wall, and I just don't see that happening, is to try to get in there with a straight-edge screwdriver and a hammer, create a little notch, or at least try to get the tip of the screwdriver on one of the corners of that nut and try to tap it to tighten it. The problem is I've got to go in there real like this, kind of overextend my arms, and I know I'm probably going to pop something on my back, so let's go ahead and try that and see if we can solve it.
The difficulty is getting both arms into the cabinet. One holding the straight edge screwdriver, the other swinging the hammer in a relatively confined space. Well, it looks like I'm not going to be able to resolve this leaking bulkhead tonight. Now the plan changes from what can I do to slow it down or contain it until I can resolve it.
So there's my temporary solution for this evening. I wrapped a towel around there. That certainly could end up being enough to capture all the drips, and then as it crusts up it could solve itself, but again, that too is just addressing the result of the problem and not the source. So for now, at least I've got it under control. Whatever's spilt back here I've got cleaned up at the moment. The fish are all doing well. So I will let the homeowner make the decision as to when we want to address this, because I think I could, and it would be slick to coordinate it with the aquarium service, where I would just end up pulling those decorations out, draining 95% of the water into my container out in the van, slide that whole unit out away from the wall, and be able to reach in behind there and grab a hold of that bulkhead, or at least somehow get a better grasp on that bulkhead so I could tighten it, and then just pump the water right back into the tank, minus say 10 gallons, which I would do for new. New corals back into the tank. The fish would be a little unhappy about having their world turned around, but aside from an aquarium, if they came from the real outdoors, ocean, they're used to a little bit of current every once in a while. So, got it under control, and a plan is in the works.
Be sure to come on back for part 2 of Water on the Floor as we drain the tank and try to tighten that leaking bulkhead. For now, let's go home, as I think it's still early enough to order some pizza.